point entirely.
Yeah.
Well, you know, what Sergio said was they were going to do the Giorgio platform. And then he said they decided not to do that. And they were going to take the existing platform for the Charger Challenger and 300 and modify it. And he said, you won't believe what they did with that. He said, when you see it, and this is where I'm quoting directly, it will shock your socks off. Since then, I ran into an engineering company that said, yeah, they couldn't use the Giorgio because it was not wide enough or would not accommodate a wide enough architecture. Because those are pretty wide cars.
Right.
And I've talked to a guy who has seen the cars. And he said, you know, right now everything's sort of rounded and soft from a styling standpoint. He says it's going crisp and sharp. And he said much more European, he thought, in the design.
Wow.
So, and I thought they were coming out this fall, but I haven't heard anything since.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be 300 too? Will
I don't know
300
about
stay
the
in there?
300. I know for sure the Charger and Challenger.
Okay.
I don't know about the 300.
It's fairly unlikely if they continue to roll out these special editions and slightly modified and tarted up versions of things now if they're going to be coming with something new that soon.
Yeah, that's the question. The 300, I can understand the nameplates, the sporty nameplates, but 300 is almost like an antique car when you see it on the street.
Yeah, well, that whole segment has
old-timey.
collapsed.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the full-size car segment.
How many do they sell a year, 300s?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head.
They sell 20,000?
Through the first
More.
quarter, they sold 8,290,
Okay.
which was down 36% from the first
Okay.
quarter
So that's
last year.
30,000,
a year.
35,000 a year. But I want to say the Charger does 60,000. The
How do you
Challenger
guys
does
get
80,000.
30,000? You guys math had worse than mine. It's like closer to 26.
Well, 8 times 4, roughly.
Oh, that was for the quarter.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, our math still is worse than yours.
Why do you think we're editors?
But look up Charger and Challenger, because I want to say they do, like I said, I thought Charger was around 60,000, Challenger around 80,000.
Okay,
I thought it would be the other way around with all of the police fleet business and rental car business that Charger does.
So first quarter Charger, 20,615.
So there's 80,000.
Challenger, 13,431.
So
that's-
52.
Yeah.
So that plant's
And
at half
Charger-
capacity-ish.
And Challenger was
know.
down 24%.
Well, for a while, there were some pretty good incentives on Charger, at least in this area. Not Charger, Challenger, at least in this area. You could get a 5.7 Hemi for like $239 a month.
So it's shocking.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ouch.
No, I mean, it's shocking to me when you hear the commercials for like on Sunday mornings when they're talking about great lease deals on, and I swear I heard one that said something about getting a Silverado for like $97 a month.
Really?
I mean, it's just insane. It's insane. I mean, but here might be an aberration in terms of the rest of the country. I mean, if you were in Kansas City,
Right.
you're paying,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. Or North Jersey or wherever.
or wherever else.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, because if that price was even semi-real, it's an employee price, not for the general public.
available on any day that doesn't have a Y in it.
And the content would usually be very specific. I got a 2016 Cruise a while back for $63.55 a month. I mean, I remember that exact number. It was one of those things where when I saw it, I was like, I'd be stupid not to. I don't need a car, but $63.55, why not?
Right.
And it wound up being the car my kids drove to school. But when I went to the dealer to get it, I wanted a blue Cruise, and they had a blue Cruise with almost the same content as the red one that I wound up getting. Well, the blue one would have cost me $219, and the red one cost me $63.55. So that was an IQ test.
It's less than a third, but I mean, just think of that number. I mean, you can't.
Red looks good.
Exactly. I like red now.
You can't get a phone for that
I
kind
know.
of money.
I know.
Hey,
I think it would be opposite, that the blue car would be tougher for them to get rid of.
It had an option on it that wasn't part of this lease special option.
okay.
It had to be a very specific content to get the 60.
I wonder if there was just one. I mean, if you got the one.
I may have. Because
And
he
then the
did tell
next
me
customer that
was
came in and bought the exact same thing ended up paying whatever that other number was.
Good deals to be had when they shut assembly plants down. You know?
No kidding.
Oh, man.
Lordstown edition.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the control room said, Yuval Litvin just came into the chat room from Israel. So welcome, Yuval. And Lindsay, you just got back from Israel.
Had a great time. Tel Aviv, the Eco Motion Show, which is in its, I think, 7th year this year. A tech startup-based show in Tel Aviv. It was outrageous. We visited GM's, our research center there. Ford opened up a new one. Just the whole vibe and buzz of the tech community in Israel was it was outrageous. It's great.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy how it's going there.
Yeah, yeah.
They really glommed onto this whole move to autonomy, connectivity, and whatnot, and built a whole ecosystem around it, or are building an ecosystem around it.
Right, right. I met just going around this trade show, talking to people. 3 different CEOs of young companies were either still F-16 pilots or had been F-16 pilots. So the Israeli military is kind of swirled around in this whole thing too. And it's a culture where risk is encouraged. It's not degraded. In Germany, if you start a company and it fails, there's kind of a limit on the next time you can start a company. Whereas Israel, it's where's the next company going to come from? So it was great.
Okay, we're going to start the show. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
All right, welcome everybody. Especially welcome Mr. Gary Vasilash.
John, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Boy, I go away for a couple weeks, get new music.
It's new to me too.
Oh, there you go.
Good thing we're on the show to learn what it's all about.
That's right.
You know?
To be with this morning, I came to the conclusion that I'm now warming up to the idea of autonomous vehicles.
Really? Why?
So as I'm driving to work, you know how sometimes you're driving along and there's somebody who's poking right in front of you, and then you get around them and you see that they're talking on the phone,
Yeah.
and they're paying no attention to driving.
Right.
There was a woman who was brushing her teeth.
Seen it already. It's no big deal.
Just
That's new to me.
Just like, I mean, literally. I mean, she was brushing her teeth.
That I haven't seen. Putting on makeup. I've seen people reading the newspaper. I know
Seen shaving?
No, I haven't seen.
I've
shaving.
seen shaving.
Now, it was electric shaver.
Electric shaver,
Okay.
yeah.
At least that's better than soaping up the face.
And see, but I was driving to Plymouth, where Lindsay Brooke of SAE is from.
Well, it's a thing in Plymouth.
Is it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So good dental hygiene.
Yeah. Everybody's got to get to work early in Plymouth, so we do it all in the car.
I see.
Okay, so it's official now. Everybody watching the show knows that Lindsay Brooke from SAE Engineering is with us.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
And
good.
do you brush your teeth in your car?
I don't.
Do you brush your teeth?
I do. Right.
I brush my teeth every Tuesday, whether I need to or not.
That's right.
Hey, we got to let everyone know, too, James Martin is with us today. He's the Senior Research Analyst for Powertrain and Compliance for IHS Markit. And terrific to have you on the show here, James.
It's terrific to be here.
So what's compliance mean?
It means how are we doing as a company and as an industry meeting EPA and NHTSA regulations for fuel economy and for greenhouse gas
Okay,
compliance.
so making sure we're meeting all the regulations.
Right.
You're a gearhead guy, right?
Big time.
You spent a lot of time at General Motors.
Yeah. I actually started at GM as a 17-year-old co-op at what used to be General Motors Institute, so it's Kettering University now.
Right?
And
What made you a gearhead?
my brother and our next door neighbor week swapped out an engine from a Mustang into a Pinto because they were putting a better engine in the Mustang, and it just caught me.
Cool.
James, you guys have recently done a study looking at the landscape of powertrain, both North America and globally.
Yes.
And I mean, much of what you found, I found to be absolutely fascinating. I mean, when you looked at the launches of North American engines, you found a pattern. Talk to us what you found in that regard in terms of here.
Definitely. We actually just finished in the past week or so a road show with some of our supplier-based clients and a couple of the OEMs. And the first slide in our discussion says, reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. You might think Mark Twain said that, but we think the internal combustion engine said that. And what we found is that, well, two big findings from my perspective. One is that when we look at the global vehicle market and compare that to the North American vehicle market, completely different views of the world in terms of engines in particular. North America almost looks like a separate island when you're talking about technologies. The other thing,
In terms of internal combustion engines?
in terms of internal combustion engines and what really pops in each region. One of the big findings, for example, the second biggest by volume type of engine is a 3-cylinder engine. Almost non-existent in North America.
Second largest volume.
Second largest
But
volume.
this is globally.
This is globally.
Huh.
But in North America, it's almost non-existent.
That's right.
In North America, the second largest volume of engines is going to be a 6-cylinder engine. And
And first is four-cylinder? Yeah,
4-cylinder.
okay.
And it's grown to that over the past few years. It didn't used to always be 4-cylinder. But it's
I remember
grown
when
to
it was all
second.
V8,
It was
or
all, yeah.
mostly V8.
It's do you have a small block or do you have a big block?
Yeah.
But what we now find is for 6-cylinder engines, globally, they're almost disappearing. And there's also a shift in structure for 6-cylinder engines. We're seeing it go from V6 to inline 6, and there's a reason for that. What we're seeing in a number of particularly European and some Asian automakers, they've developed design around a single half-liter cylinder set. And what that allows a company to do is kind of protect their engineering and manufacturing footprint, because they're able to say, if the world wants 3 cylinders, I can make them. If they want 4 cylinders, I'll add another cylinder. If they want 6 cylinders, I'll add 2 more cylinders.
So just slicing the block.
Slicing the block. And the cylinder design is the same, so there's manufacturing flexibility. You can go with where the demand goes. If down
The valves are the same, the pistons are the same, blah, 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 all that stuff.
And John, that's key from an engineering development standpoint, because now when you're developing the top half of the engine, your intake systems, your exhaust systems, your fuel injection systems, you're doing it one time for a wide spread of engine product. And what we're finding is now that's developing into what I've call mega platforms for engines. There's 4 mega platforms, for example, that are going to support in excess of 3 million engines a year from each of these families. And a couple of those are actually very new engines. So you think about that, the whole idea that the internal combustion engine is dying. Well, you've got GM introducing a new family of engines that by the time it's mature, it's going to be producing 4 million engines a year. That doesn't sound like dying. You don't develop new engine programs on a dying technology.
Well, you don't, but sometimes the world changes. What do you think is going to happen with electric cars? I mean, maybe not with lithium-ion batteries right now because they're a big problem, super expensive.
Yeah.
But what if in 5 years, all of a sudden, the solid-state battery becomes available and it's cost competitive?
If the solid-state battery comes to fruition and is cost competitive, what you're going to see is a significant segment of the market going to EVs. But you're not going to see this wholesale lights out for ICE shift in product mix. What you're going to see is that, yes, EVs become more affordable and you see them in more classes of vehicles for people who want them. But you'll also see, I think, electrification providing more assist to ICE. One of the biggest growth areas we see and propulsion technologies is mild hybrid EVs, especially in Europe. Mild hybrids are replacing auto stop-starts pretty quickly in Europe. And what that does is it allows you to either run with a smaller engine and run for significant amounts of time with that engine off. And when you need it, it's like any other hybrid, it comes directly in, but it's not as expensive as a typical Prius or Toyota Camry type hybrid system.
But James, you're saying, okay, globally, 3-cylinder engines,
Yeah.
and in your earlier study that I saw, you said that new engines in North America, that FCA introduced a 6.7-liter Cummins diesel, Ford a 5.2-liter supercharged V8, and GM the 4.2-liter twin-turbo Blackwing engine. All of these things, massive engines, massive horsepower.
Yes. Yes.
So how does that play elsewhere, or does it?
No, it does. And what you find with those are excellent point solutions. The 7.3, let's take the Ford 7.3, for example. Ford has in their Super Duty usually had a 6.2-liter gas, a 6.8-liter gas, and a diesel. And what they've done is they've developed this 7.3 that just produces massive amounts of torque at the very low end. It's perfect for medium duty. And what it does is it keeps them from having to stretch their modular engine, the 6.2, 6.8, to doing both light duty and medium duty truck duty. Now they've got a purpose-built 7.3-liter medium duty engine, provides gobs of torque. It doesn't have a lot of high-end power like the other Ford V8s do, but it doesn't need it because you've got a truck that's working, it's pulling stumps, it's hauling heavy equipment, it's doing the job. The 5.2, and staying with Ford, is another great piece of work. I mean, we're living in great times now. If you're a gearhead, you've got Shelby Mustangs. We were talking about the wide body Challengers and Chargers early. You've got Camaros, the new Corvette coming, C8 Corvette. The horsepower wars are on, and that 5.2 puts Ford right in the middle of the game for the horsepower wars, whether you're talking about the flat crank that's in the GT350 or the one that they just finally announced the output on, the 5.2 crossplane crank, supercharged, 760 horsepower in the GT500. I mean, if you're a gearhead, this is the
best time ever.
This is the time.
All right.
Now, how long are those engines going to be around? That's another story. But right now, while it's around and you look at the vehicles those go in, the companies that are producing those vehicles, whether you're talking the GT500 or you're talking the Camaro ZL1 or you're talking the Hemis and Red Eyes, they're printing money.
So when you say how long they'll be around, I mean, give us a sense of what you mean by that.
My biggest concern for those engines is when you look at the vehicles they're in, and this gets into the compliance part of what we do at IHS Markit. A lot of the fuel economy targets are based on footprint, vehicle footprint, and that's basically the area between the tire patches. You could almost say it's wheelbase times track. Well, there's different targets to meet for car fleets and truck fleets, and the truck fleets are a little easier to meet because EPA and NHTSA understand physics and know if you've got a truck and it's doing work, it's going to burn more fuel. So you've got to give them maybe a less stringent target to hit. Cars don't get a break. When you get cars that have a shorter wheelbase or a thinner track, narrower track, basically a smaller footprint, then the target is just that much more. And the cars I just described, Camaro, Mustang, Challenger, have a smaller footprint than like a 7 Series or I would say Taurus, but that's going away, but those bigger cars. So their fuel economy targets are significantly higher to reach. Now you put a 480, 500, 700, 760 horsepower engine in it, you're kind of tipping the scales the wrong way from a compliance standpoint. So unless the companies can protect those cars, remember they're in a different fleet, they're in the car cafe fleet, not the truck cafe fleet. Unless you can protect those cars, then you're going to have to either dial back on the big high horsepower engines or give them some electrification help. And if you look at Ford in particular, Fusion's gone, Focus is gone, Fiesta's gone. Car is Mustang. And so you've got to balance your cafe plan on Mustang's 4-cylinder and now 2 different 8-cylinder engines.
And what role in the next, we're going to see this explosion of EVs in the early 2020s. James, what role do they play in kind of creating this balanced fleet? And also, could you comment on CARB versus EPA in terms of where that battle is going right now? What do your clients, the suppliers and automakers, have to do right now to stay in good stead?
In terms of how the electrification can balance it, I think the biggest role electrification can play in balancing cars is by providing electric assist and allowing for engines, be they base engines or more powerful engines, but to be able to be off as much as possible. I mean, that's the whole purpose of hybridization. And we do know that Ford is going to deliver a hybrid Mustang. That's part of the rationale. The longer that engine's off, the better your EPA cycle numbers are. You can at least approach those targets, and then you can rely on credits and other strategies to actually keep it compliant within the fleet. With regards to EPA versus NHTSA, that's kind of a
EPA versus ARB.
That's really the bigger issue, because actually
Everyone's
EPA
waiting
and
to see
NHTSA
what's
seem-
going on with that, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of strange the way it's playing out. And to me, one of the strangest things is, I was watching the congressional hearing last week, and first seeing EPA and NHTSA kind of holding hands and basically saying pretty much the same things. When has that ever happened? Yeah. But CARB seems to be kind of left out of the party and trying to get back in. But the strangest thing to me was hearing that the automakers are saying, let's stay the course. Let's not dial back the standards yet. And I think it's because, for one, to have a plan, you have to have a target. And to have targets that continuously shift, it drives the automakers nuts. What's the target you're aiming for? And the other, I suspect that some of them have already invested in technologies to meet the targets that are on the books. And if those targets get dialed back, then that's money that's not well spent.
James, getting back to the hybridization, okay, so Ford has the GT 500.
Yeah.
Okay, so massive horsepower.
Yeah.
Would shutting that engine off for a short period of time make any difference?
No.
It's just
No, it won't. It won't be the difference. It's one of those things where it won't help them. Turning that off won't help them clear the line, but keeping it around is just that last little anchor that might keep them from getting closer. So it becomes a portfolio decision. It may be a question of how many of them can we afford to keep in play, how many can we offset through portfolio moves, pushing more 4-cylinders. And now if I sell 10 more 4-cylinders, can I sell 2 more 5.2s? Playing that sort of a game.
how much money would it cost them to develop that engine?
I wish I could.
I mean, just ballpark. Just
For that one, I mean, they have the basics of it with the Coyote engine. So there's that. The crankshaft, getting a flat plane crankshaft for that displacement of an engine running that fast, it's got to be tens of millions just for the crankshaft. I mean,
it's shocking.
because you're doing it in low volume. The manufacturing of that is going to be different than your other lines. Even if you're buying it from somebody, you're buying it from a company at slightly better than prototype volumes. So you're paying a lot. You're paying a lot of money just for that.
No economies of scale there.
Yeah, no economies of scale.
James, what kind of technologies might extend the life of the internal combustion engine? And I ask you that because last week we had this startup company come through, and you probably talked to them too, transient plasma ignition.
Yeah.
And they claim, and they got patents from, I think it was Aragon, and I don't have my notes in front of me, so I can't remember. So this is National Lab stuff. This isn't, flaky stuff, I don't think. But they've come up with a low temperature, low energy, very impressive plasma ignition system, or at least impressive in terms of a presentation.
Yes.
Do you think something like that could work, or are you looking at other technologies that might extend the life of a piston engine?
Both paths, actually. In fact, I haven't talked to Transient, but several years ago I spent a lot of time with folks at Federal Mogul understanding their ASIS technology. It's also a plasma ignition technology, and to be quite honest, I'm more than a little bit surprised that that hasn't come to market yet.
What does it do? I mean, either one of these things, the Federal Mogul?
It basically replaces your spark plug with a more efficient way of igniting the air-fuel mixture, and more completely. What you want to do to get more power, more fuel efficiency, better emissions, is you want to burn that air-fuel mixture as fast as possible and as cleanly, as completely as possible. And the plasma ignition setup, and you had a nice video on the show that you had them on. It basically permeates the entire cylinder volume and ignites all of the fuel almost simultaneously through the whole combustion chamber.
Right. So when you shoot off a spark plug, if you've seen videos of the internal, the inside of a combustion chamber, there's a flame front that has to travel across the top of the entire piston. Right. This just bam, Shazam, everything's gone. There's no flame front.
Yeah, and I saw that a few years ago, and actually I think I saw it at an SAE High Efficiency Engine Symposium, and started trying to track that technology then, and until your show, it had kind of died down for a while.
Yeah.
The other technologies I think are going to be big, dual fuel injection, having PFI and direct injection in the same engine. Ford does a lot of that. Toyota does a lot of that. The German automakers are doing that. And that's where it kind of started. It's their answer to particulate emissions problems in Europe meeting
so
the Euro 6.
So you do indirect injection for starting the engine, then you switch over to direct injection?
Right. You switch over to direct when you've got heavy load and you need to make that load because direct injection at low load does produce particulates, and that.
Would you use the port fuel injection if you're just cruising along?
Yes.
So it would switch.
And you could actually, in some applications I've seen, use both. I've seen one application, for example, that their main reason for having dual fuel is because at high speeds they can't get enough fuel. So let's put two systems in and really dump the fuel. But that's one that I think is going to help. Mild hybrids, 48-volt mild hybrid in particular has been one of my favorite technologies for years. It just seems like it's the logical answer to get great fuel economy, but also deliver additional performance for the customer. Because one thing that I've learned over the years, customers don't pay extra money for more fuel economy. They'll pay for more performance. They'll pay for more functionality. If I can tow more, if I can haul more, if I can go faster, I'll pay more money. The decisions on fuel economy are made at the nameplate level. I will either buy that car or that car based on their fuel economy positions. But now when it comes time to actually paying for a technology that I want, fuel economy doesn't even rate.
Now, is that just true in the U.S. or global markets?
I think that's true pretty much globally.
Really?
It's pretty much globally. Because again, where fuel economy is more important, the buyer's making the nameplate decision. Is car A more fuel efficient than car B? If so, I'll buy car A. Now you start the discussions about, now how do I want to equip that car? And you're not talking additional fuel economy. Nobody wants to pay more for stop-start. I know of people who pay money to have active fuel management taken off of their vehicles, which seems kind of counterintuitive.
I mean, actually removed from the engine.
Actually removed from the engine.
That's quite a job.
Yes, it is.
Couldn't they just buy another car?
I mean,
but I think that the thing with mild hybrids and why 48-volt mild hybrids, the reason I love that technology is it gives you the additional fuel efficiency, but it can also give the car more torque, more launch torque, more engine assist, even at city speeds and in some cases highway speeds. And you can attach other things to it.
Electric turbos.
Exactly. Yeah. Electric turbos that will give you that boost at the launch of the vehicle, eliminates turbo lag because it's doing the turbocharger's function until the turbo can catch up, and then they just kind of, shake hands and turbo's in.
James, are you seeing the industry moving towards 48-volt architectures for this reason?
For that reason, and also primarily in Europe in luxury-based marques, because there's so much content on the cars with ADAS, with telematics, right. With the connectivity, that the typical 12-volt systems can't handle everything.
How about trucks in the U.S.?
Trucks in the U.S.
We've seen Ram and Jeep go to it already.
I think Ram and Jeep go to it because FCA needs it. They need the fuel economy part of it. And so it's you can either go high-priced full hybrids and plug-ins at fairly low volume, or you can go a broader volume of 48-volt hybrids at much lower cost to the customer, and also explain to them the benefits of the extra power. They call it e-torque.
Yeah.
Isn't
good marketing.
Isn't 48-volt one of those technologies, though? You said you've been covering it for years, that it always seems to be coming. Just wait, it'll come. And then next year it's like it's coming.
Exactly. It has been, and that's why I'm kind of loving it now, because it is really coming in, and people are actually really starting to pay attention to it and starting to take it on. And I think that's going to be one of the things that keeps the ICE, a real player in just the global automotive market, and eventually it'll take hold more in North America. We see by 2026 about 40% penetration of mild hybrids, most of them being 48 volt in Europe. So North America will probably lag that by a few years, but I think it'll.
You think it'll get up to that point in this market?
I don't think it'll get to that point, only because our vehicle markets are so different. I mean, we've got full-size trucks, we've got full-size utilities, and the V8 is still going to be the solution for those types of products. So
and cylinder deactivation has done a lot too for these guys.
Exactly, and when you look at the skip fire injection that you find on the GM vehicles, I mean,
pretty impressive.
Yeah, being able to run a truck at moderate load for one cylinder, two cylinders at a time. That's pretty awesome, and it's fairly seamless. I've got active fuel management on one of my cars, and I actually have to look at the display to know when it's in 4-cylinder mode. That's why I'm kind of amazed at folks that spend, I think it's right around $400 is what I've seen to take it off. I'm like, I don't even notice it's there. I don't know what benefit I'd get from taking it off.
Hey, going back to performance a minute, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, have you heard of a Hercules engine at FCA?
Yes.
What is that?
We're not totally sure. We're trying to connect the dots there, and to be honest, we're not sure if it's even still around. We assumed that the Hemi was getting an upgrade, and that this Hercules would be that upgraded, even more powerful Hemi, beyond the Hellcat. But the discussion on that seems to have slowed down.
Well, I'll tell you why I asked, because I was at an SAE event for young professionals, and they did a Q&A with these FCA executives, and somebody said, hey, tell us about the Hercules engine. And the first reaction was, how did they know about Hercules? And then it was like, we don't know anything. They're all looking at their watches and pretending like they didn't know anything about it. So I figured you're a piston engine guy, you might know something.
That's not their name for the new inline 6, is it?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm thinking like you're talking about Beyond Demon.
Yes.
Maybe 1,000 horsepower. I'm just guessing. I have no idea.
James, in your research, you came up with this phrase, which I think is rather compelling: global propulsion design islands.
Yes.
As you looked at the various markets around the world for types of powertrains.
Yes.
Tell us about what you guys discovered.
What we found, and I've started to touch on it a bit when we were talking about 48 volt. If you look at the global industry, and then you look at what's happening in Europe, what's happening in China, what's happening in Japan, you start to see some similarities there. You start to see mild hybrids growing in most of those regions. You start to see plug-in hybrids growing to a lesser extent in those regions, and you start to see battery electrics growing in those regions, especially China, especially Europe. When you look at North America, it is for the foreseeable future more than 70% ICE unassisted or ICE with stop-start. So just a combination of those. And the growth in mild hybrids and the growth in plug-ins and full hybrids is minimal. And the growth in electric vehicles is primarily regulatory driven. It's the CARB states, basically, California and the additional Section 177 states. So when you start to look at where the technology is lying in those areas, it's typically in the European automakers who are engineering to the more difficult Euro 6 standards, or it's in China where China is mandating a certain percentage of battery electrics by a certain amount of time and putting a lot of incentives on at the consumer level to push electric vehicles. So when you look at how that whole propulsion system design breaks out, how much of it is hybrid, how much of it is ICE plus stop-start, North America just looks totally different than the rest of the world.
And to put some color on that, I mean, for 2025, you're saying 74% in North America for ICE
Yes.
in variants, 42% in Europe, 45% in China, and 51% in Japan and South Korea.
Right.
When you get to 2030, slightly moderated here from 74 to 66, but listen to these numbers for these other markets. Europe, 28%, China, 25%, Japan, South Korea, 41%.
Right.
So what happens to scale? What happens to sharing engineering across the globe in terms of powertrain programs?
It still works because when you step back and say, how many of those are battery electrics or fuel cells, which are the current only two approaches to zero emissions, and also the only two solutions that don't use an ICE, you're still in a world where 90+% of vehicles being driven have an ICE. Now, it may be smaller, 3-cylinder, 4-cylinder. It may have less peak power, but it's also assisted by electric motors. And what we're seeing is the tougher regulations in Europe and China are driving that use of motor assist to the ICE faster than it's driving it in North America.
So you follow electric stuff too?
Yes.
Okay, we got a bunch of questions coming in about that. We're going to have to take a quick break, but two comments from viewers before we go, and you're going to like this one. Peter Egan, and I believe this is the Peter Egan from Australia, says, you got to get James on more often. He is surely the best powertrain guest to date. And Big Barney says, going back to the Hercules discussion, 1,000 horsepower, he says, an EV with 1,000 horsepower would be very easy to produce. No transmission, no big cast iron. So just two comments there. Maybe we'll talk some more EV stuff when we come back. But first, a commercial break.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what BorgWarner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back. And this, of course, is the time of the show where Dr. Data makes an appearance.
Okay, so this has absolutely nothing to do with powertrain. So, yeah, look, James is crying over here. Okay, but it has something to do with technology, and it has something to do with something that we're all becoming increasingly familiar with. So, Katie, could you please bring up the first numbers? Okay, 57.8 million people have used smart speakers in their homes. 45.7 million people use them monthly.
You mean these are like Bluetooth speakers?
Or, Hey Google or
Like Alexa. kind of.
Alexa. I just
gotcha,
said that, and I'm sure that there's one in here right now that is turned on and is going to answer the question before you guys do, because it's got this. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, you look at you look at a TV commercial and you see somebody comes home and says turn on the lights, and the lights go on and so on. Okay, so this is in the home. Growing phenomenon, no question about it, right? So, how many people talk to their cars, or their SUVs, or their trucks, and they could be
So
they
does
could
this
be Dodge
include
Demons.
voice recognition?
Talking.
Okay. Wow, I'd say a lot.
In other words, the car is equipped with that capability.
And you use it.
And
Right.
you use
Okay, so
that's
so
the
two
key,
parts.
right.
So one is how many people have used it? How many people use it? And again, this is talking in your vehicle.
Let's see, I'll do some math in my head, which means I'm never going to get to the answer based on our earlier math attempt.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to say probably most cars right now must have voice recognition. Most cars must. And we sell seven. What?
Really?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Between OnStar and like Chevy MyLink, Ford's Sync, Uconnect.
Right.
So if you figure 17 million market over 3 years, that's 51 million cars that are equipped. I'm going to say 30%.
Okay.
I'm going to say 15 million.
Okay, I'll say 20 million.
Okay, so all right, so now we saw. Okay, so you're saying there are 15 million people. This is an accumulated number. This isn't just. So this is okay.
Oh,
this is the number who have used them, and this is the number of people who've used them monthly.
I'm going to say 15 million for the number that have used them in their car.
Now remember, this could be anything, though.
It could be anything. It could be CarPlay, Android Auto,
Right.
Uconnect.
Right.
I'm going to say 15
Something
million
from Nuance.
have used them. Now, how many kept using it? Use it every month. So now I'm going to say 9.
I was
Lindsay?
gonna say 15 million.
So you're on 15.
I'll stick with my 20.
See, and this today's number, there was some debate. Some people didn't think this was a very surprising thing, and you guys will be as surprised as I am. Katie, bring up the answer.
114 million have smart speakers in their. Oh, they've used
them.
77 million a month. Wow.
See? Are you guys surprised?
I'm one of those
Yeah.
77 million. And I
You
use
talk to
it
your car?
all the time.
I never talk to my car.
I'm one of those too, but I'm sort of a tech geek.
That you do talk to your car?
Yeah. I mean, I'm the one that if you put a technology on the car, I'm going to figure out how to use it, and then I'll watch my wife, and she's like, "I got no time for that."
Lindsay, do you talk to your car?
I do.
You do too?
I do, yeah.
Really?
I do.
Well, I'll give you my best example of how I use it, and I'll bet you guys are the same too. If I'm going somewhere, I've got my phone paired, and I always ask for directions, even though when I know exactly where I'm going, because
Right.
traffic these days can be crazy.
Right.
Yes.
And one time, just 2 weeks ago, I went, what does this Google thing know? and I didn't follow their directions. Of course, got caught in a traffic jam.
Yeah.
So, but if you're giving an address to a car, you especially want to use your phone. Voice recognition in cars stinks for the most part, except for Tesla, because again, they, like your phone, process all the information in the cloud, not in the car, so they're accurate. But I'll bet that's how most people use it.
So, do you think you count your phone as being
A device.
separate from your car?
I do.
I mean, so if you plug it in, I mean, isn't it just basically a large speaker that you've plugged into, or a receiver that you're plugged into?
I'd go the other way. I'd say that the car has become the large speaker for my phone.
Right. All right.
Okay, wait. The control room's got a snarky remark.
I'm sure
say,
they do because.
He doesn't talk to his car. He likes his easy chair.
Right. There's a long story behind that, but.
Okay. Hey, we've got a couple of viewer questions and comments. Why don't we just jump right into that? So this goes to you, James. SubGR77. Any word at all on the Acades engine?
Oh, yeah. That's another one I've kind of followed for years, the opposed piston engine.
Yeah.
I don't see any OEMs using that anytime soon, but it's one that I think could probably land in some military applications. And I know Acades, they're working with an OEM. I'm not sure which OEM.
They haven't been Fords, Ford F-150s.
Well, and that's why people assume it's Ford, but I'm pretty sure
not.
it's
That's
not.
just
Exactly.
Sleight of hand.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Michael Combs says, asks, what do you know about the Wrangler PHEV or electric?
PHEV's coming.
Okay.
PHEV's coming. They already have the 48 volt. PHEV's coming.
Okay, we were talking about all the technology going on to cars, and WDWL TV says, all this technology is to stop the backyard mechanic from working on their own vehicles. Not everyone can afford dealer labor rates. Plus, some of us still like to tinker with our vehicles.
A lot of truth to that. And cars are smarter now. Not only are they harder to work on, but they also tell when you do.
James, I wonder, I mean, to the point of that question, when I missed the show a couple weeks ago, I was out driving the new Explorer, and I was with Gary Witzenberg, who's been on the show, and so we were driving this vehicle, and we were not sure whether it was the hybrid or not, okay? And so when we got to a stop, we popped the hood and looked, and lo and behold, there was a large engine cover. You could see basically nothing. We couldn't see spark plug. We could see nothing. So here's my question to you. Is it advanced technology like plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles and whatnot that makes it more difficult for the home mechanic? Or is it just the nature of any modern engine that is in any 2019 or 2020 car on a lot right now that makes it difficult?
I think it's going to be mostly the electronic interfaces, because when you get down to the bare metal, you take that cover off, you take the engine control module off. If it's a hybrid, if you take that module off, it's still all blocks and rods and pistons and valves and springs. So from a mechanical standpoint, it's all still there. The basics are all still there, and people can still work on them. But as I was pointing out, now the computer is going to tell the dealer that you did, that you worked on it, and in some cases that could have warranty implications. For all the other stuff, the glass half full side of that is now you can go to AutoZone or anywhere else that has a scan tool and quickly diagnose what the issues are. You may not be able, as a backyard mechanic, address them, especially if they're electronic in nature, but at least you know what it is and can communicate that to a dealer, so you're not paying hours upon hours for diagnosing the wrong problem.
And don't you think a lot of shade tree mechanics understand trouble codes, and they've got a basic plug into the OBD port tool, and the tools are becoming less expensive, and people that really want to work on more modern cars, I think, are getting more proficient in this, right?
Yeah, they are getting more proficient. There are also, at least in the U.S., laws that the auto companies have to comply with to give information to independent repair companies and facilities of how to repair those cars and to be able to do it even within the warranty period of the car. So yeah, it's more difficult, and but you can go to a non-dealer service provider for your car, but still not a good situation for the backyard mechanic.
We've got another question here from Jeff Taylor from St. Louis, Missouri. He's asking you, James, can you estimate when the traditional OEMs will be able to surpass Tesla's EV powertrain technology, or will they ever be able to do that?
I guess I'd want to define surpass. Are we talking in terms of efficiency, range? Are we talking in terms of what it delivers for performance? I'm really impressed by Rivian.
By Rivian?
Yes, and what they're able to do with their skateboard and with the performance that they, at least on paper, can get out of that truck, the R1T and the R1S, the truck and the utility. It's going to be interesting seeing those come to market. And then there's a really utilitarian approach to the truck. I mean,
And here we got a picture of the skateboard up
yeah,
there.
and there's the skateboard, but even when you look at the truck and the form factor of the truck, that pass-through that they have through the body, I mean, it's the simplest thing, but it is awesome.
Cool.
It is awesome.
So, Lindsay, didn't you talk to somebody at Rivian recently?
Yeah.
And what's your impression?
Well, they're starting out low volume, high, premium priced vehicle. And clearly Ford and everybody else, I mean, if the future is electric, we'll see this in other people's vehicles. But I agree. I mean, there's some things about that truck that they really thought out. And it's a local entity, so we'll
It's in
just have to
Plymouth.
see.
They're probably
in
brushing
Plymouth,
their
Michigan.
teeth.
I know. Yeah.
Hey, we got a phone call here from Jonathan Brown. Let's bring that one in.
Hey guys, it's Jonathan out in Old Japan, New Jersey. Always loving the Autoline network. I have a question. The question is, do you think 2020
We just lost audio out here, Carmen.
is going to be a soft?
Oh, there we go.
No.
No. Okay, she's going to type up the question and we'll get it. In the meantime, Brad Grisham on the Camaro 6 forum says, ask Jim, in parentheses, James, about his 2017 50th anniversary Chevrolet Camaro convertible, which I believe you drove in.
Yeah, I saw that in the parking lot here.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Shout out to Camaro 6. Oh my God. Yeah, that's it. That is my retirement present to myself. I retired from General Motors in March of 2017, and I said my retirement car is going to be a convertible, and it's going to have a V8. That surprised a lot of people because they saw me as Mr. Hybrid, Mr. Electric car. I'm a fan of both. I mean, that car sits in the garage next to a 2017 Volt, so I'm kind of schizophrenic that way. But it's just a blast to drive. If it's sunny, I'm out and the top is down.
Cool.
Hey, question for you. You mentioned Volt. Why hasn't that concept of a series hybrid really taken off? When Volt came out, James, I thought the industry is going to latch on to this, at least in the short term, for having your cake and eat it too. An engine that runs at steady state is basically kind of a generator. Why do you think globally that concept has not taken off?
Okay, I'm going to say we on this one because at the time I was at General Motors
GM,
when this was going on.
Yeah.
So I don't want to confuse anybody. I'm at IHS Markit now, but when I was at GM and the Volt concept first came around, I loved it because what it is, and we had a hard time. This is the we part. We, General Motors, had a very hard time explaining to people exactly what it is. And what it is, it's an electric car with a generator for when you run low on charge. My wife drives it the most. I get to drive it to go get gas. I haven't driven that car since probably November because she typically doesn't need gas. She gets up, it's got a, quote, full tank, 60 miles of range. She goes about her daily, goes to work, runs errands, comes home, plugs it in. Next time she goes, she's still running on electric. And we've had a hard time General Motors has had a hard time as a company explaining to people what it is. And I think at some point kind of really just threw in the towel and said, yeah, okay, it's a plug-in hybrid. And when you think of plug-in hybrid, you think of a car more like the Prius that runs on both gas and electricity concurrently most of the time, whereas this car runs on electric almost all the time. The other part of that, though, is it's got two powertrains, and that's an expensive proposition. So what you've got now with, you know, the Volt that we're driving, it's got a gas engine, it's got an electric motor, it's got a big battery. All those things cost money.
Right.
So you have a car that's pretty much based on the Chevrolet Cruze, and the sticker on it's $40,000. You know, not a lot of people pay $40,000 for a Cruze unless they clearly understand all the other parts of that construct, and we didn't do a very good job of communicating that.
To follow up on Lindsay's question, though, I'm wondering if this had caught on and other automakers besides Fisker decided to use this technology, wouldn't the costs have come down some? I mean, some, not necessarily a lot, but
some, and I think the other part of it, because in this case, GM did a lot of the components, so that, you know, having Fisker involved wouldn't have helped, other than that the first Fisker models bought engines from GM,
right?
But it was a different engine. But the idea was to have the Voltec powertrain as a product family, just like small block V8 is a product family, and to expand that into small utilities and other small sedans and other vehicles, and basically get scale that way by putting it across additional nameplates.
Rather than selling it to another OEM?
Right, right. But we've pulled the plug on that. That's my joke for the day.
Yeah.
I think wrong body style. I think first gen sedan was fine. I think the second gen should have been a utility.
Yeah. Okay, here we've got the transcript from Jonathan Brown's question. This is about sales, not about powertrains. Says, always loves watching Autoline. He says, the question regards 2020. Do you think we're going to have a soft decrease, or a hard crash? Right now, we're running in the 16 to 17 million units a year area. Do you think it's going to drop down to 14 in a year? Just curious to what our opinions are. He says, no one's got a great crystal ball, but anyway, thanks very much. Loves the show again.
I think it's going to be down. I don't think it's going to be down that much.
I'm going to disagree with them. Somebody does have a great crystal ball. IHS Markit.
Yeah, we got the source right here. Come on, Jonathan.
And I'm looking at the projections from our vehicle production team, and for 2020, we're looking at stable for North America. We're looking in the 16.6, 16.4 million
but
units.
Keep going. What about 21 and 22?
21, 22. We're still in the 16.6, 16.7.
Interesting.
So Alex Partners, did you see that number?
I sure did. Right.
So that's pretty. So they're predicting for 2021, 15.1 million in the United States, which is considerably less than where you guys are.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm going to stick with that number.
And we've got a show with John Murphy from Merrill Lynch that hasn't aired yet for the TV show. He's saying 13 to 14 million
when
2022.
Yeah.
So the Alex and Partners, they go down and then they slightly go up.
Around what year?
Just, I mean, 2022 gets higher than 2021, and you know, I mean, so, but it's not, you know, a huge number. So it's more of a dip than a drop off cliff, which sounds like that guy is talking.
Well, John, I mean, Merrill Lynch came out with this, I want to say almost 2 years ago. And then they started to back off it. Now they're coming back to that number. So who knows? It's, I hope IHS Markit has got it nailed, because that doesn't sound too bad. Sticking in the 16s, everybody can still make money.
Right.
If it drops down into the 14s or even below, yow.
Okay, I got something that is Camaro and is sales. So a publication called Muscle Cars and Trucks suggested that the Camaro would be done in 2023. that there would be no Generation 7 Camaro.
No replacement.
No replacement. Now, the GM Authority reported that it's going to be on hiatus. It isn't necessarily being killed, okay? So, and I know you're a big fan of Camaro, but so I was looking at the sales number. So again, for Q1 of this year, Camaro sales were 12,083. Okay, they sold more Impalas in Q1. They sold 13,259. Okay, if we look at all of the sales for 2018, they sold 50,963. Which was down 25% from the year before. And again, they sold more Impalas in 2018.
I had no idea.
So they sold 56,550. So they basically sold 6,000 more Impalas than they sold Camaros. Okay. So then I looked at Mustang sales.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I had to look at Mustang sales. Okay. So for Q1 of this year, they sold 16,917. But that was down 11.7% from
16,000. So
Mustang.
what'd you say?
17,000
Okay,
Mustangs.
17,000, and Camaro was what again?
12.
12. Okay.
Okay, and then so for 2018 sales, they basically sold 76,000 Mustangs versus 51,000 Camaros. Okay, and as you mentioned earlier, that we're going to be having the new Corvette come out, and it's going to be performance heaven, presumably, right? Yeah, he's saying yeah. Okay, so will the Camaro exist?
Okay, here's my thoughts. I'm going to put Camaro fan off to the left for a second, and I'm going to put my planning hat on, because a lot of my career at GM was spent in product planning. So I understand planning speak. Planning speak for what just happened with Camaro is GM said our normal major for Camaro would normally be around 21, maybe 22. What we're going to do is
Major refresh.
Major refresh.
Yeah, yeah.
What we're going to do is we're going to push that out a couple of years. And we'll come in and look at it then and decide what we want to do. Camaro's on Alpha, the first generation of Alpha. The new CT4 and CT5, built in the same plant, are now coming off of the second generation of Alpha. So the assumption was Camaro will pick up the second generation of Alpha.
And the current generation Alpha is the CTS and the
CTS and
ATS, and they're both going
And they're
away.
both gone. So Camaro is there on Alpha, CT4, CT5 on Alpha 2. So it appears, and when I say it appears, remember, GM has said nothing yet on this whole thing. But it appears that GM is saying we're not going to move to Alpha 2 for Camaro yet. We're going to stay on Alpha 1 for a couple more years and see what we have to do. And what we have to do could include electrification options, either supplementing the gas engine with some sort of electrification, a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, or maybe a battery electric. Or we'll make a decision that says, okay, maybe it has run its course. Maybe we can't fit the short wheelbase, high target, high EPA target within this product, so we need to move on from Camaro. The thing is, that decision hasn't been made. What GM has done is said, we're going to make that decision a couple more years down the road. That's the planning speak part of it. And it actually is pretty consistent with what we talked earlier about what's going on with Challenger and Charger. Are they ever going to be on Giorgio? Same thing. That decision just gets pushed out while FCA has to take a look at what do we have to do to balance our compliance. And Ford has even done the same thing recently. There was going to be, currently Mustang is on the S550 platform, and it was going to migrate to the S650. Ford has said, and this is the difference between Ford and GM, Ford has actually said, well, we're going to extend S550 for a couple years. And we're going to make some enhancements to the car on that same platform. So they kind of got out front and controlled their message. GM didn't get out and control its message. I would suggest that what may have happened is somewhere in supplier land, somebody said, why am I not getting orders for Alpha 2? And magazines pick up on that and go, oh my God, the next gen Camaro's gone. And GM doesn't say anything. So
We're going to talk about future products.
Wow, great insight there.
All right. Okay.
Does Ford become the kind of in the vanguard of electrifying pony cars, so to speak? Because they're still on schedule to be first for a hybridized Mustang, right?
they will be the first for a hybridized pony car. They won't be the first for a hybridized performance car.
Right.
Porsche, oh my God.
Right. but I mean, within the American muscle pony genre, they'll be kind of they'll be the guinea pig, really, to see if the public takes up on it. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so John, knowing what you know about the numbers, does Camaro have a future?
Boy, I can't see GM giving up on the Camaro. I cannot see the Chevrolet brand walking away from it. And here's another reason
They
why.
did before, though, right?
They did, but this is a new GM, too. But here's what I would add.
From 2002 to 2009, there was no Camaro.
Right.
Right.
The numbers that you cited for Mustang are only U.S. figures.
Yeah.
25% of Mustangs are sold outside of the United States.
Right.
So add another 25%
Right,
on top of those numbers.
Mustang's going to live, but the question is, does Camaro?
But look, why is Mustang more successful than Camaro? I believe it's because when you sit in a Camaro, it's like sitting in a bathtub that's up to your neck.
It's claustrophobic.
You know? It's claustrophobic. There's no room in the back seat.
Yeah.
I mean, not even for little kids, because they got to be in child seats and they don't fit back
That's why James got a convertible first.
And there's no trunk space.
Right.
Compare all those three things I just mentioned to Mustang, and people go, wow, I can live in a Mustang every day of the year. I can commute back and forth. I can have one car and it can be the Mustang.
Good point.
Camaro, you can't do that. And so if and when, because I believe it's going to be a when, Chevrolet says, okay, bang, we're going to meet what Mustang has got us beat on. I think Camaro can compete very effectively against a Mustang, but they also have to start looking at what Ford did and make right-hand steer versions of it and seriously go after an export market.
Yeah.
Because I was stunned when I heard that 25% of Mustang production is sold outside of the U.S.
Yeah, wow.
I thought it was 8 to 10%.
Wow.
Lindsay, is it going to exist?
It's a good question. I mean, Mustang to Ford is different than Camaro to GM because Corvette is in there as kind of the icon of performance for GM. So I don't know. Maybe a revamp. I think with Mark Royce in there, I think he's probably behind this. I would bet it's going to exist. Revamped, fully revamped.
See, I wonder the amount of money that these companies are spending on developing electric powertrains, the amount of money that they're spending on mobility. And you're sitting there in General Motors and you're looking at these sales numbers. I mean, you kill the Impala that sells more cars than the Camaro. And I understand it doesn't have the same halo effect. Yeah. But you're saying, you know what, we just spent a ton of dough on making a new Corvette for the ages. And do we really need to spend the money that we really don't have right now to keep a name alive?
I'd look at that in a slightly different way. GM spent all that money to do a C8 Corvette, which is going to move up market. It's not going to compete with Mustangs or Chargers or Challengers.
Right.
So it leaves that much more room for an even better Camaro to do that. The question becomes, how do you get to that better Camaro? It sounds like GM may have made the decision that Alpha 2 is not enough of an improvement to do it now. There are other platforms coming. GM is working on commonizing platforms for front-wheel drive cars, for rear-wheel drive cars, et cetera. And there's a scenario that says in this commonized rear-wheel drive platform, now you've got the makings of something that can underpin Cadillacs, Camaros, and other rear drive vehicles. Now, you kind of have that now with Alpha because the current Camaro is on Alpha and the CTS and ATS were also on Alpha and CT4, CT5 are on Alpha 2. GM just spent a lot of money to upgrade Lansing Grand River. CT4 and CT5 have less volume than Camaro. So if you
You're painting a picture for keeping the Camaro.
Yeah.
If you upgrade that facility, unless there are more Cadillacs coming off of Alpha 2, then you kind of need Camaro in that plant to help support volume, at least through the transition to get more product on Alpha 2. That could be another reason for continuing Alpha through 23 on the on the Camaro, so that you've got Lansing Grand River running at an efficient volume with CT4, CT5, and Camaro. Now you get to 23. Are there more Cadillac sedans coming in off of Alpha 2? If so, then maybe that volume can replace Camaro. Or again, maybe now you're moving into yet another platform that handles even more vehicles. And as GM, you make the decision then, Camaro or no. So I think the decision hasn't been made. And anybody who thinks they know the decision has been made that's not wearing a GM product development name tag, they're just,
Speculating.
I was going to say
That's more fun.
something
Come on.
else. Speculating. That's my word for the day.
Hey, look, we've got more questions from the audience, and there's other things we wanted to talk about, but we've really taken up the whole hour here. So it's
been great.
I think with your last thought there, this is a good time to wrap up the show. But James Martin from IHS Markit, thanks so much for coming on. We'll definitely have you back again.
You know where to find me.
Okay. Lindsay, Brooke, great having you on board
Thanks,
as
John.
well. And Gary?
And maybe your wife will let you drive the Volt next time.
I'll make that happen.
And Gary, we'll keep doing this too.
Sure.
Okay. Want to thank all of you people out there for having watched this show.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv. So, like I said, we still got some questions here. Bob Wilson, he's a retired engineer in Huntsville, Alabama. He was wondering, did you see any of that Monroe and Associates EV powertrain teardown comparison or anything like that?
I didn't see it. I did get some of the data from it, but it's been a while since
okay.
I've looked at it.
He says, by the way, he drove 787 miles to that conference, paid $24.92 in EV supercharger costs in his Model 3.
Nice.
Wow.
Pretty good.
Nice.
That's pretty good.
Wonder how long it took him to get there.
Good question, Bob. You're probably listening. Let us know how long it took you to do it. So, I had brought up plasma ignition. Are there other technologies you see that could extend the life of the piston engine?
I was going to ask you about water injection. FEV's working on, BMW has it in production.
Yeah.
And trying to achieve Lambda 1 with pretty good output. They're looking at, some companies are looking at that.
I've seen it, and I saw Mercedes' approach to it, and I saw BMW's approach to it. And I'm not sure that it gets enough in either a fuel economy or a performance mode to where, right now, one of the measures in all the OEMs is dollars per measure of fuel economy saved. And all the technologies are ranked that way. And this one just hasn't made anybody's list yet.
And you've got the packaging issue of a tank of the coolant.
That's a big deal is, when you're asking the customer to add something, whether it's water, antifreeze, AdBlue for diesels, customers kind of like, I'm not sure I want this, or if I can avoid doing it, AdBlue, it kind of forces you because it reduces the power of your engine if you don't do it, and that can be annoying. I don't know how they would approach water that way.
How does BMW have it set up? Is there a, when you open the filler door, are there two?
I believe there's another outlet or a spigot.
Just put a hose there.
Right. Garden hose, right?
At one time, I think they were actually looking at if they could take air conditioning condensation and route that back to the tank.
Yeah.
BMW was also working on a technology, God, this goes back 20 years ago, I want to say, of using exhaust gas to generate electricity. And it wasn't a mechanical, it's not like they had a little wind turbine in there. It was, I don't know what it was. They explained it to me and it went right over my head.
Are we in a fairly fertile time for just ideas being kind of tossed into the mix?
I think so, because I think what we're going to see is, battery costs are doing this, engine costs are going to do this to get to compliance. And so it's kind of like, the door is open. Come with your ideas, come with your best ideas. And they're moving more and more down that list of technologies, dollars per cost of fuel saved. They're getting to some higher numbers. And that's why mild hybrid is becoming a thing, because it's not cheap, but it's also a big bang for the buck. So, and you can make a performance argument, so you may be able to even recover some of that cost. But other technologies, even when you can't recover cost, you're getting to the water levels where, until batteries come way down in price, you've still got room to add new tech.
Let me ask Lindsay's question slightly differently. Okay, a fertile time for ideas, but is it a fertile time for implementation of some of these ideas,
good point.
making these ideas real?
I would suggest that ties into, what's going on in the planning cycle for each ICE. Like now, GM's CSS and FCA's GME T4 are new product. And probably 4 or 5 years from now, they'll experience a major upgrade. That's the time you want to drive new technology. So, suppliers that are looking at what they're providing now for CSS, this is the time to start to get those ideas for cost improvement, fuel economy improvement, output improvement, get those ideas into GM and FCA for the products that they're supplying, and get them interjected in at the next major.
And the cycles are about 10 years now still with engines, something like that?
For a major upgrade, but you'll still have some technology upgrades that can happen right around 4 or 5 years.
Got to ask you this question, because I spent some time with FCA. The Hemi still has a cast iron cylinder block.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see an upgrade of that? It's money, but it's math saved?
That's almost the Hercules question again. And that was one of the things I was wondering, when Hercules was floating around, is that part of it? Would it be doing an aluminum block version of it, or is it just all about the power, like the Demon and the Red Eye have been? And so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think that maybe on the low end, the GME T6, if they have an enhanced version of that, now that starts to overlap with where the 5.7 is. So that might be one play that they make, and then just keep the cast iron 6.2, 6.4 for the really out there, outrageous applications.
Okay, that's interesting.
Hey, we did get a response from Bob Wilson. He says, block to block, he said he averaged 51.8 miles an hour. It took him 15 hours and 11 minutes. But he adds, of course, an old man bladder appreciated the spots.
You bet.
Stops. So, James, let me ask you this. GM and Ford have come out publicly calling for one grade of gasoline in the U.S. I want to say
95 octane.
95 run?
Yeah.
And a year or two ago, they were saying, oh, yeah, the oil industry is very interested in, and now they're telling me the oil industry had no interest in this whatsoever.
Aramco, I think, was their partner.
And were they developing engines? They said they needed the higher octane to be able to meet emissions standards. Where do you think that all stands?
I only heard bits and pieces of it. This was right about the time I was retiring, and I know Dan Nicholson was pushing real hard for that.
Yep.
But I never really heard where that went. It just kind of went quiet. So.
Yeah, I think it's not happening now.
I mean, Europe is kind of the standard for that, right? I mean, it's...
I don't think they're that high, though. I don't think they're at 95. Well, I mean, but the way they measure, see, in the U.S., it's an average of, I forget the two. There's Ron, and I forgot what the other one is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's an average, and my understanding is Europe it only measures the higher of those two.
Okay.
So it seems like it's a higher octane. It seems like it's 95 there, but it's equivalent to US 93.
It's remarkable to me how like the price of premium gasoline in the United States is so high compared to regular. I mean, when it used to be 20 cents a gallon more,
Yeah.
I mean, now it's $80, $90 more.
Wow.
So to your point earlier, when you're saying that nobody wants to pay for fuel economy, can you imagine the outrage that people would have if they were suddenly told, oh, by the way,
You can only buy premium.
right?
Now, if you went to one grade of gasoline, you'd be able to mitigate the cost. And
Yeah, good luck with that.
yeah, but good luck with that. is
Oil
the
industry
factor.
won't have, yeah.
And I'm just, in the environmental circles now, they're really pushing renewable natural gas, RNG. Do you see any hope for that whatsoever?
In a vehicle, in a consumer vehicle environment, I really don't see it happening.
But maybe
in
commercial?
yeah.
Yeah.
In commercial, it makes sense, especially, fleet commercial, where you've got a dedicated fleet and you can do your own refueling.
You go back to the
on
yard
site.
every night and the fuel's there.
Exactly.
So it was interesting, Volkswagen came out with a release this week about their natural gas-powered vehicles in Europe and consumer cars as well as commercial vehicles, and talking about how they have a broad range. You can get a Polo with a CNG engine and all the way up. And so I contacted the PR people in the United States and said, can you get one here? Nope.
Yeah.
Polo with a CNG tank. Is
Well, I
there
mean-
room for anything else in that car?
It's a one-seater.
It's a one-seater, right?
Remember the Honda Civic where,
Yeah,
they were
natural
also
gas.
having natural gas and they would set you up with a
Yeah.
home unit for
Still.
natural gas, and
Right.
That was great.
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere.
that just quietly went away.
But they're really worse than an EV running out of juice, so to speak, because you've got no cord to plug in. When you're out of CNG, you're out of CNG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty of CNG around, but you're right. The stations are far and few.
Right.
In Europe, it's a whole lot better. They also sell auto gas, which we call propane.
Yeah.
You can find that fairly easy. Same with CNG. You can.
So what if you went to a hardware store and got a propane tank? You ran out of your CNG and
Right.
It would work, but you'd go through that tank in no time
Yeah.
because the pressures of CNG, the tanks, is pretty high.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I want to say it's like 2,500 psi.
Yeah, it's an expensive tank. It is.
And propane is much, much lower, but it's still like 250 psi. And I know people watching right now are cringing because I got the numbers wrong, but it's that order of magnitude difference. And that's the problem with those things. To convert an engine, a piston engine, to run on natural gas or propane is pretty easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot. The tanks are like batteries in electric cars. They're horrifically expensive.
Really expensive, yeah. What do you see for diesel in the U.S.? Pretty much a truck play,
Truck play.
light-duty truck play, yeah.
Yeah. And what's been surprising me lately is mid-size pickups are really, kicking into gear on diesel. I mean,
Like Colorado is.
yeah, Colorado Canyon. Typically, when I was doing planning stuff, rule of thumb, diesel 5%. They're at 8.
Wow, it's like a $5,000 option in that truck.
Yeah.
is that for commercial use, do you think?
I don't think so. I think it's largely personal use. I think maybe there are some people that are replacing their full-size Silverados with Canyons and Colorados, and
They want their
checking them out
diesel.
for diesel.
Yeah.
So will that have an effect on the diesel in the Silverado then?
No, because those are, well, they haven't been there before. Not in the 1500 series. They've been in the 2500 series.
Right.
They haven't been in the 1500. I think there's going to be some honeymoon period for all three of the big three: Ford, Ram, GM, with 3-liter diesels in the 1500s. It's a nice package. I mean, someone drove one recently and was approaching 40 miles per gallon. I think it may have been Stephanie. You know Stephanie
Yeah,
Brickley.
yeah.
I think
Stephanie's
she was
been on the show, right.
driving one recently and was approaching like 40 miles per gallon. I think it was one of the Chevy pickups.
Well, you know, they've always said that the most loyal buyers in the business are pickup buyers, and the most loyal pickup buyers are the ones who have got a diesel.
Yeah.
Hey,
for GM, Ford, or a Ram.
You guys probably notice it too. You know, all of us that are car people that like look at cars in detail. My wife says, "Why are you looking at that badge? You know, TDI on the car." But I mean, it's an indicator. And how many people didn't turn in their TDIs that kept them?
Yeah.
And they kept them for a reason. You know, I'm amazed passing cars on the freeway that, you know, they did not have their Volkswagen diesel crushed.
Yeah. They also didn't have their Takata airbag replaced.
Yeah, right. right.
Although I'm still getting recall notices for a car that I disposed of 3 years ago, and I took care of the recall. So I fixed the recall, then got rid of the car, and I'm still getting, you need to take your car in.
Wow.
I don't know how to turn it
There's
off.
some breakdown there.
It's called diligence.
Yeah.
But I want to say that I make fun of it, but I mean, there's tens of millions of people who have not gotten their Takata airbag replaced.
Wow.
They just ignore the notice.
Yeah.
You know, you probably heard Toyota and Honda, who tend to take this more to heart, have been really active about trying to get people to do it. And Honda even sent people out to knock on doors until somebody came out of their house with a gun and told them to get off their goddamn property.
Wow.
So that's the craziness you got to deal with.
Well, the OEM has the liability for that, right? I mean, if a bag goes off, you know, not in an accident situation.
Right. No, absolutely the automaker is liable.
Yeah.
Even if they can prove, we tried to get them in here and get them to replace it. We had a bag waiting to put in. You're still liable.
And it's amazing how long this has taken. I remember we had Robert Davis when he was at Mazda several years ago on the show. And I remember him saying, okay, let's no longer talk about Miatas for a moment. Let's talk about the Takata airbag recall. I mean, it was just that it was so important that, and it was years ago. And and as you say, millions of people haven't taken.
Toyota has approached me. They want to do one of my TV shows all about this, about their struggle, and they want to get other automakers involved and talk about. And I know I've got a really good friend who never got his GM ignition switch replaced.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't care.
Yeah.
So it's
Hey,
crazy.
what's your view? You know, we're talking about electrification, when this whole thing is going to be happening, and you know, VW obviously put themselves under the gun, and they're making what I think are pretty hyperbolic statements about by 2025, no more combustion engines, or and people tend to get mixed up electrification, which is hybrids versus battery electrics. But do you think the Germans are out ahead of their headlights on this? I mean, when you look at the pushback in Germany on BEVs and charging and the infrastructure and all that, I can't see within basically 6 years Volkswagen not having engine plants in Germany.
No, they said no new engines.
No new engine programs. Okay.
So they'll still, because.
And that, you're right, that's the key word.
Yeah.
Because when I was talking earlier about these mega platforms, well, number one is the EA211. That's Volkswagen. That is the single highest volume engine platform in the world.
Yeah.
And it's like 7 million a year. They're not going to walk away from that.
Right.
They're going to assist it with electrification, but they're not going to walk away from it.
Yeah.
You know, you talked earlier about the cost of batteries coming down, but this Alex Partners study that just came out said a BEV powertrain is more than twice as expensive as an ICE powertrain. And they were using their cost that they cited for an ICE powertrain is $6,500. I would contend that's a pretty sophisticated engine. I believe that if you had a naturally aspirated 2-liter 4-cylinder engine with a 6-speed automatic, you're probably looking at a little over $2,000 for that. But what I'm getting at is, what do you think in terms of battery costs coming down? Because they are coming down, but I don't think they're going to come down anytime soon enough for the industry with all these electrics coming out.
Yeah, I would agree with you that they're not going to come down that astronomically. I mean, there's going to be some scale, but then you're going to have situations where somebody's got to add new capacity, and that new capacity is going to cost, and it's going to keep the price at a certain level. The thing is, though, when you're comparing the total cost of an EV to the total cost of an ICE, no exhaust systems, probably less expense in braking because you can do regenerative braking through the e-motors, no cooling systems, or let's just say a different cooling system for the batteries. So there's going to be other cost offsets, and that's probably why, back to the volt question, the cost involved in maintaining two propulsion systems, you still have to keep the exhaust, you still have to keep cooling systems for both the engine and the battery. When you start to get rid of those costs, you start to bring the cost of the EV down to a more reasonable level. And I think that's where Mark Royce was coming from when he said there's going to be a point of parity between a battery electric vehicle and an ICE vehicle, because some of the tech that's going to have to go into the ICE vehicle to keep it compliant is going to make that more than the $2,000 2-liter that you're talking about. It's going to become more like a $3,500 2-liter.
Particulate filters and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So when you guys compare those two, because the battery is the energy storage system, is the ICE system including a fuel tank and fuel lines? It should, really.
It should, and those, again, become things that don't exist anymore when you go from ICE, even an electrically supported ICE, to an all-electric vehicle.
Yeah.
Get rid of the gas tank, get rid of the fuel lines, reduce the braking, get rid of the exhaust, change the cooling.
In the Alex thing, they have the engine, transmission, drive shaft, differential, final drive. Those are the elements of the powertrain that they track. And then for the battery electric, it's motor, gearbox, battery, power electronics, control systems, and differential. And if you they've got 10 grand for the battery. So in everything else is almost a parity.
Yeah.
So if you're able to significantly reduce that price,
It's all about the batteries.
it's all about the battery. So, and Elon's inventing a new battery as we speak. I don't know what the hell you're worried about here, John.
No, look, I'm all for the move, but what I've said all along is nobody in the world knows how to make a profit on an electric car. Nobody.
Right.
Tesla makes more electrics, sells more electrics than everybody else put together, and it still can't make a profit.
You wait, James Dyson. Mark my words right now.
Okay.
He's going to come out with that thing. People are going to buy him. It's going to be great, just like he transformed vacuum cleaners.
Yeah.
Let's write this down.
Okay.
What's today?
Wait, we got it on tape. Okay, let's wrap this up. Thanks, man. This was really good
Great.
having you on the show.
Great. Yeah.
Great.
Enjoyed it.
Of course, by the time that this comes to fruition, we'll all be somewhere else.
Well, yeah.
Gary. Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Take care. Thank you.